So this panel will throw light on how SD-WAN is impacting the digital transformation initiatives of enterprises. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the panelists, Ralph Santitoro, who is the head of SDN, NFV, and SD-WAN at Fujitsu Network Communications. Jeff Lewis, who is VP of product development at Comcast Business. Nav Chander, Senior Director for Service Provider Marketing from Silver Peak. We get into the discussion itself. We have a set of thoughts that we want to go through, how SD-WAN is impacting the digital transformation. I had a couple of slides to kind of set the stage. Based on the research that Frost & Sullivan has been doing in the SD-WAN space, we did an end-user survey earlier this year to understand when you look at digital transformation, right, what are the business drivers driving some of these DT initiatives? So as you can see, we have improved customer experience, maintaining compliance, improving business productivity as the top 3 reasons, and so on and so forth. Something that kind of is different about this survey results is, in the past, we've always seen that improving operational efficiency or business productivity being ranked #1, but this time we saw that improving customer experience is ranked #1 when companies are investing in digital transformation initiatives, which is great, because now they understand that all the technology investments that they're making, they're tying that into how well this is enhancing the customer experience, which at the end of the day drives top line and bottom line growth. We also asked in the same survey, what are some of the technology trends of priority in the next 12 to 24 months? So as you can see, hybrid cloud services, network application security, and SD-WAN, and so on and so forth are some of the top 5 trends. So there are other tech trends that we included in the survey in this question here: IoT, 4G, 5G, UCaaS, VoIP. Those are ranked in the bottom. That's why I'm not showing them, but they're all there. But when you look at what's of priority, these are the services. So SD-WAN is critical. It's ranked #3, and it kind of intertwines with a lot of other trends that we are seeing here. So let's get into the discussion. Let's start with Nav. Nav, when you look at SD-WAN and how it's impacting other technology trends, right? First one is hybrid cloud services. From a service provider, so from a vendor perspective who sells SD-WAN solutions, what are you seeing about SD-WAN acting as an enabler for cloud applications or cloud connectivity? Just give us some insight into that.
Thanks, Roopa. And just so everyone knows, Silver Peak is one of the leading SD-WAN vendors. We also like to call SD-WAN self-driving WAN. One of the things that we're seeing with service providers and enterprises, we have a large number of enterprise deployments in about 20 different verticals, is that artificial intelligence and machine learning, and we're leveraging some of those technologies as part of the platform that we have developed over the last 4 years. And when it comes to cloud services, there's many different consumptions. We have seen enterprises using SD-WAN in virtual instances, hosting, like, for example, SD-WAN in AWS or Azure, Google, or Oracle Marketplace. So this is something that a company like Silver Peak is very actively involved with. We also work with the service provider partners that are here, the telecom service providers, and we have some pretty interesting use cases that help them sell Cloud Connect. So being able to sell private Cloud Connect, so most service providers here in this room probably sell some form of MPLS-based private Cloud Connect. We can also enable, I call it OTT, over-the-top Cloud Connect, to out-of-region or out-of-country areas with SD-WAN and provide the same level of platform reliability and high availability. And another hybrid use case that you're seeing is using different clouds. So we have one of our partners is China Telecom Global. They are doing a cloud-to-cloud use case, actually taking AWS traffic out of China through their private backbone, through their MPLS POPs, and then using SD-WAN in the infrastructure, bringing AWS or Azure traffic out of China, so from China out, We call that a cloud-to-cloud use case. It's pretty cool, and if you want to talk more about it, any of you want to talk to them as a partner, they offer that as a cloud-to-cloud type of service. So I think cloud, the whole use of cloud services and cloud connectivity is going to continue to grow. We think multi-cloud is the way of the future, and SD-WAN is going to be enabling this multi-cloud where you'll be taking workloads. We're already seeing enterprise customers that are using workloads in AWS. They may want to provide analytics in Google Cloud. So you're going to see a lot of different business models. And one of the things Silver Peak has done, and Ralph can talk about this, with our partners like Fujitsu and Cognizant, they can offer SD-WAN as a cloud-based service or pay-as-you-go, similar to that cloud computing model that you're used to when you're using public clouds.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Jeff. Jeff, you come from Comcast Business. So tell us how Comcast is approaching the whole SD-WAN space, and also, SD-WAN as an enabler to cloud connectivity with your Ethernet internet access and the gigabit broadband networks you're bringing to market.
Absolutely. So when Comcast Business made the decision to get into software-defined networking, obviously SD-WAN was our first product. It was actually the motivator and driver. However, we made a very important decision very, very early on, probably along about 3 years ago now, that said you needed to get an extensible architecture in place first before you go jumping into delivering that first virtualized product. And so we kind of pulled back the reins a little bit and we said, look, we're going to go after SD-WAN, but we need an SDN infrastructure. It's what we call active core to be fully in place before you proceed. It doesn't mean that it doesn't evolve and it doesn't change over time, but we made that decision pretty quickly. Our approach, because we're not, we have no shame or we have no concern about the fact that we don't come from the roots of being a hardware vendor. We're not an MPLS service provider, but we were very aware of what the market was looking like. And so the idea of supporting a hybrid network where customers could avail themselves of our gigabit broadband network. If anybody heard Kevin O'Toole speaking earlier, the economics around what we do in broadband and the reach that we have to be able to deliver a gigabit, when the vast majority of customers that we see today who are interested in our SD-WAN product are still coming out of a T1 economy. And so I think the reality, while many, many customers are out there, they have fiber and they have other assets and they're talking about tens of megabits. When you start talking about a gigabit access solution at an economic value that is potentially less than the 1 or 2 T1s that they have on-prem, the conversation kind of stops. And then the conversation picks up about how do I enable myself to take advantage of that capacity and where are the changes. And so from the whole context of a digital transformation impact, that is, it's almost a conversation stopper and a starter at the same time. And certainly that's our broadband asset and our fiber assets complement that as well. We can take that up as high as we want. But that active core platform, I guess where I'll pause is the active core platform is where it all starts and stops. It's where all the incremental services will come from there. And then just to tag on to what Nav was saying, in order to access cloud, certainly we provide private cloud access. We've been doing that for years with all the major cloud providers. However, the use of public cloud is something very, very pressing and very, very present for the customers that we deal with, both big and small. And the idea of being able to use local internet breakout with a simple stateful firewall or an advanced layer 7 firewall, that's exactly what they want. If you look at a legacy MPLS network where everything gets home run back to the data center or to the corporate headquarters and then internet drained out, that's an architecture of the past. It has a lot of applicability. But when you look about moving decisions out to the branch and when you're looking to enable and empower, again, we're trying to transform businesses. We're not necessarily playing with networks. We're trying to do something that's really helpful to the business. Well, if they want to access their cloud assets, if you will, wherever they are, being able to use local internet breakout is a very simple thing to do, but it's a very powerful application.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Ralph, so Fujitsu is offering SD-WAN as a service, and you're offering this directly to enterprises as well as service providers, right? Like through service provider partners, enabling them to offer this service. So talk a little bit about the offer itself and then how you're helping both enterprises and service providers take advantage of the hybrid cloud connectivity trends.
Okay, thanks, Roopa. Yeah, so we deliver our offerings called SD-WAN as a service. It's an over-the-top managed SD-WAN service. And it can run over any type of underlay network from any service provider. And so our role bringing that to market is we actually offer that to service provider resellers. So it's either a service provider maybe that wants to get to market with an SD-WAN offering and and I'm sure as Jeff will attest to, it takes a long time. It could take 12 months to 2 years from the feedback we've gotten from service providers to be able to actually roll out, bring a service to market. So we can actually get them up and running, and we run the service out of our NOC, deliver the full service to the enterprise subscriber for that. And we also sell through enterprise VARs, so that's our go-to-market for that. In terms of the digital transformation, I think one of the unique things about SD-WAN is that it's not just a connectivity service. It's not like automating a connectivity service to improve operational efficiencies. That's the least significant or interesting part of it. It's really, I think Jeff touched upon it, the user experience, and it's really focused on applications. It's focusing on how do I bond WANs together. So, as Jeff mentioned, if I have an MPLS pipe, usually it's a very small pipe. Enterprises will have that for their private network. Then they'll have this big broadband pipe, maybe 100 meg, maybe a gig, all the way up to a gig. Usually they're disparate pipes. My private stuff goes over my MPLS, my internet stuff goes over my broadband connection. Now with SD-WAN, you bring the two together, and now I can have 10, 100, maybe 1,000 times more bandwidth between sites, as well as being able to go off to the internet. So if you look at the enterprise digital transformation, they're moving apps. Apps used to run inside the building, or maybe they ran in a private data center. More and more apps are now moving out, either into the public cloud, like if you're running Office 365 or Salesforce.com, for example, or you're running it in a virtual private cloud workload in Amazon or Azure or Google Private Cloud. So our SD-WAN service offering not only supports bonding the connections together to avoid cost, but get a huge amount of bandwidth for the site-to-site traffic, but now being able to extend those sites to the virtual private cloud, running in an Azure or Google or Amazon, and also improving performance to public cloud services like software as a service.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about SD-WAN as an enabler for managed hybrid WAN services. It's bringing all these different network services together. You don't have to rely just on MPLS or Ethernet. You can have broadband, 4G, satellite even, these services. But that brings in a lot of complexities when you start layering all the different enterprise solutions on that, enterprise functions on that. How do you ensure security across the entire WAN infrastructure, right? And Ralph, let's go back to you again because you started this theme, right? How is Fujitsu helping take out some of these complexities?
There's a couple of things. If you look at SD-WAN, there was a lot of do-it-yourself maybe a couple of years back because there weren't enough service providers out there, or they weren't quite sure. They wanted to, the early adopters looking at the technology. Now that the technology's been out there and proven, and especially working with our technology partner Silver Peak, it's really now how do I get what I like to call always available networking. Because when I was talking earlier about moving applications to the cloud or a virtual private cloud like in Amazon or a public cloud application like Office 365, you now need to have your network needs to have multiple WANs. If one WAN goes down, the other can take over, and that's one of the huge benefits you get with SD-WAN. But not only wireline, so if people usually when they think of a WAN, they'll think of wireline, LTE and eventually 5G are going to play a huge role. So now you can have multiple, maybe MPLS, broadband, and LTE, or possibly 5G. So you have both wireline, wireless, so two different technology types, MPLS and internet, all intermixed, and they could all be delivered by different service providers. So you have service provider diversity, you have technology diversity, et cetera. The other thing we do with Fujitsu's SD-WAN as a service is we also monitor in real time with the underlay networks. So you can imagine if you had 100 or 1,000 site enterprise locations, and one site maybe they had AT&T for their MPLS network, but some had Comcast broadband, some had Charter broadband, et cetera, local broadband providers. Now the enterprise subscriber would have to manage, if the underlay network went out, they'd have to monitor, contact that service provider. As part of our service, we actually monitor all the underlays from all the different service providers. And so we actually we'll actually contact the service provider on behalf of the enterprise. And in fact, if they have two WANs, they might not even notice an outage. They'll see it on the dashboard that we provide them. but we'll contact it, work with the service provider, get it fixed and up and running, and the enterprise might not even notice it unless they looked at the dashboard.
Great, okay. Jeff, Comcast is one of the examples where you don't have sunk investment in MPLS, because most often when we talk about SD-WAN, everybody assumes that you don't need MPLS anymore. You don't have MPLS, so you don't have to worry about that. Right. But then you have private networks, right? Ethernet services, and now with gigabit broadband services. So talk to us about the different managed services you're offering, not just the network services. What other feature sets come with the managed SD-WAN offering?
I'll answer that in two ways. So the first piece on the ENS point, I like that. Thank you for that. We actually just recently launched our ability to overlay our SD-WAN, our layer 3 SD-WAN solution on top of our ENS, our layer 2 network solution, which is a very, very, very powerful solution for any customers who really want that private network look and feel. One of the two aspects, and I love what Ralph was describing in terms of the implications of the managed service. I mentioned ActiveCore. I mentioned that we hold all the infrastructure within our network, so customers don't have to worry about the complexities of managing that. However, a lot of customers do want to know what's happening to their network, and they want to be able to touch it, perhaps self-manage it. I've heard the term co-manage, right? What we made the decision early on, whether it is one of our underlay networks or potentially not, what we decided to do is make a very, very large bet on what we call the digital experience. The reality of life is, and I've been doing this, if you guys can see me, I got a lot of gray hair up here. We've never really made all of these network advancements without continuing to bring the complexity into the solutions that we deliver. And when you present that or position it with a customer, unfortunately, early on, what we saw with our customers, we saw some good examples of people successfully rolling their own, doing their own implementations, but we also saw a fair amount of buyer's remorse because they didn't realize the total cost of ownership, the operational implications, the sophistication, the knowledge that is needed in order to run these networks. Right? The reality is a lot of people got roped in, if you will, on, hey, this can be very, very affordable. It could potentially be cheap. Well, if you look at the full TCO, the costs actually can build up over time if the customer wasn't fully aware. So one of the things that we did, and we're quite proud of it, is we don't use any, we don't reskin any of the information that we get. For example, in our case, it's Versa. We love Versa, our partner. We don't reskin their portal, if you will. What we do is we pull all the data, all the APIs from them. We correlate those APIs from our underlay. We correlate that information with anything that we're seeing from a hybrid networking perspective, and then present that back to the customer in both a web top as well as a mobile app that gives the customer the immediate look and feel of what's going on with their network in what we believe to be a pretty intuitive fashion. And I can say that with passing the red face test because we asked customers what they wanted. Right? We didn't go off behind a curtain, build something, and say, ta-da, here it is. And so what we're really trying to do is solve the problems for the customers. And Roopa, I'll close by offering, customers challenged us that say, congratulations, you're going to go after this interesting new software-defined network. I'm not quite sure what that means, but it sounds next generation. That's great. Could you please build an interface and a network tool that can interact with me? The more you can help me, because I don't have eyes on glass all the time. I don't know where the problem is. If you can make my life easier, either for the customer or perhaps for the operator partner, that's really the ticket of where you go from adoption to making the customer happy.
Great. Thank you. So when it comes to SD-WAN or even managed SD-WAN, there are a wide variety of choices through whom you can buy. So it could be the network service provider, cable MSO, system integrators, VARs, and buy SD-WAN as a service, as an on-demand offer. Can you talk to us about the different partners Silver Peak is using in delivering managed SD-WAN services?
Yeah, thanks, Roopa. And let me just first quickly refer to your survey that you didn't highlight one thing that I think is really relevant. In the survey that Roopa, SD-WAN survey, 75, I think it was almost 75% of those enterprises prefer to go with a managed service provider. And within the managed service provider, you heard Jeff mention co-manage. We have seen as we have deployed now well over 1,000 enterprise deployments globally. So we have one of the largest So from those learnings with those customers, our deployments, we actually learn from those. We're seeing demand from both service providers and our channel partners, our resellers, for more co-managed capability, which means they want some configurability. They still want the guarantee and the connectivity and the assurance that a service provider, but they want to be able to turn maybe the bandwidth or turn a few controlled features. The beauty of having a platform approach is at Silver Peak, we can enable a full managed service provider to offer that with their own portal and APIs, all the way down to a VAR offering just a couple of features. I'm going to give you an example of new business models we're seeing with, so we have system integrators, VARs, and telecom service providers like Fujitsu, NTT, China Telecom, Global, and others. But there's also new business models. I'll give you a telemedicine backpack as a service. So there's a company out of Boston called SWIMED that's offering life-saving 4G SD-WAN service in a ruggedized backpack with 2 of our ultra-smalls connected to dual 4G networks in India, China, all over the US. It's actually saved real lives with that telemedicine hosted in Azure. So talk about a company that has infrastructureless. They're hosting this telemedicine app. They started in ambulances, rescue vehicles. Now they have it on the head, in a backpack. It's a ruggedized thing. We have a little thing. You can come to our booth and show it to you. But it's pretty cool to see how SD-WAN is being used in a business model where it's a pay-as-you-go service. I call it backpack as a service. It's a recurring model where they pay on a usage base. So that's a different type of service provider. It's a new business. It's a new opportunity. And we think that SD-WAN is more than just a connectivity service, as you pointed out. It's all about the networks are adapting to the application.
Yes.
So that's the key difference. In the past 20 years, it's all about the apps had to, whatever network was available, they had to adapt.
Yeah,
the paradigm has shifted. And with cloud-enabled and cloud economics and everybody used to that, you're dealing with enterprises coming to us, and we're learning from a lot of those enterprise deployments. And I think that's something that, as service providers, that those of you that are out there that are looking at SD-WAN, you really need to look at the experience and the learnings, and some of that machine learning is actually built into our platform.
Right.
And I know Fujitsu is taking advantage of that. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think I want to go back to Ralph on that because I somehow missed that. So MEF made this announcement this morning, right? MEF 3.0, where standards and specifications for SD-WAN has been released. And I know, Ralph, you've been working very closely in developing these. And it's very important to have these standardization as more of hybrid networking comes into picture and dynamic hybrid networking. So can you just take a minute and talk about the standardization process and how MEF is enabling this?
Yeah, sure. So the thing that was announced today was the MEF, as we've done for carrier Ethernet, standardizing the service definition for that. We're doing the same thing with SD-WAN. And I can attest personally, not only working on it, but as I talk to customers, you go out there and talk to someone about SD-WAN, and everyone you talk to has a different impression of what it actually is. And so I end up spending 30 minutes with every client or subscriber I talk to, and about, well, what is SD-WAN? It's application aware, it's hybrid WAN, et cetera, et cetera. And so the work that the MEF is doing here on actually defining what, if you want to call something an SD-WAN, or let's say a MEF 3.0 SD-WAN service, it has to have these baseline capabilities. It's over the top, it's application aware, it could support multiple underlays from different technologies, et cetera. And this is absolutely critical because now we'll set the baseline, just like over a decade ago with carrier Ethernet. If you say I have a Metro Ethernet or switched Ethernet or Ethernet over SONET or whatever, every Ethernet, there was all these different variations, and so you couldn't have a conversation. So that the work here is going to be fantastic for enabling pre-sales discussions with subscribers as kind of an immediate step. But then also as you build the services and the offers and getting certified, it's going to have a really big impact on the industry. We anticipate, just like we had with carrier Ethernet.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much. So I did speak about the convergence of SDN, NFV, and SD-WAN in my introduction. And I think that's the overarching theme we are seeing now. In the initial days when it was just vendor-delivered SD-WAN, it was more of an appliance approach where you have a SD-WAN appliance, which comes with some inbuilt functionalities like stateful firewall and basic routing functions. But we're moving towards an NFV-based approach where you have a universal CPE, if I may say so, which can host multiple VNFs. So clearly in the future, we are seeing these two models converge, and a single, an appliance hosting single function is going to go away, but an appliance hosting multiple VNFs is the approach to go. And Comcast has taken that route from the get-go. So today it's SD-WAN, and I know you also offer some security services, security VNFs. So talk to us a little bit about how this is going to migrate to a full-fledged offering in a phased manner in the future for enterprises.
Thank you. I think one of the most important pieces to kind of start at is the basis from which you begin to offer products to the customers. What that statement means is our industry, and we're guilty, I guess you could call it, of being in the same flow of customers are expecting certain economics out of SD-WAN. I use the word cheap, let's say affordable, but they're looking for these very, very, very low price points. What that ultimately translates into are different components within the business. For example, the universal CPE. Customers oftentimes find themselves in a very, quote, small, if you take a look at what's inside of the box, the store and compute capability or the processor are very, very small. When we entered the space, we started understanding the market where customers were being positioned, offered, because of the very, very low price point, 2 core boxes, 4 core boxes. You would almost never see a higher end box unless it was some god-awful device that cost potentially $10,000. And it still wasn't really clear that you could really spin up multiple VNFs on that device anytime soon, and the economics were just way out of whack. Not that Comcast has done anything that nobody else can do, but where we are is we're heavily focused on an 8-core box as our base. And the reason why is if you put that device into a customer's premises, and then that customer is expected, they desire, or they aspire to multiple VNFs over time, a couple of things come to fold. One, you live in the world of zero touch. In our case, when the customer wants unified threat management early next year, we'll be able to just push a button, download that, and nothing has to happen at the customer's location. Yes, you have to architect it. Yes, you have to configure it correctly. You don't have to roll a truck, though. You don't have to send a technician. You do have some consultancy services on the architecture and design. However, you're not changing anything. If the customer had a 2-core or 4-core box, you start rolling out the cavalcade of people, playing with wires and people, and what does that do? It shuts down their business for a while. So the idea of multiple VNFs over time starts with the question of where is the customer starting, and does the customer understand what it's going to take in order to migrate, adjust, and consume products and services as time goes by. The other quick piece that I'll offer is we saw as we entered, and it was a challenge to us, and customers asked us, why aren't you hosting applications in the cloud? Why aren't you running security services day one when we roll out in the cloud? What we have found are a fair amount of performance questions. It's not that you can't make it work, but there's multiple models out in the industry. Our particular choice was we're opting to push it to the edge, push it to the customer's premises, and at the right time, we'll start moving things back out into the cloud. So security is definitely one of the ones we're going to roll out early next year. There's at least 2 other VNFs. One's a very low scale meaning bandwidth intensive device that we think we can get into the same base platform. And then there's another one we'll roll out, and it's really a conversation around our active core digital experience. We're not really going to see any impact to the universal CPE on premise. So I think it's the building blocks for customers. It's not that we're trying to be necessarily the best friend of all of our customers, but we try to be transparent about here's what it means as our industry races to SDN. And we really are able, and there are examples out in the industry today where some of our competitors do it right now. That's where things really start moving in terms of what we place with the customer at the beginning, so we're as less disruptive going forward.
Great. Thank you. So now let's go to you as a vendor. I mean, Silver Peak delivers the SD-WAN capability using the physical CPE as well as also as a VNF. And the unique thing about it is 4 VNFs in one, 4 different functionalities in one composite software image, right? Tell us more about that, and also the different services that are evolving in the VNF world, right? Analytics as a service, WAN acceleration as a service. So tell us what Silver Peak is doing in that.
Yeah, thanks, Roopa. So when we look at how enterprises want to consume and service providers want to deliver an SD-WAN service, or I'll call it a WAN edge service. So this whole WAN and edge, you heard it from a number of speakers all day today. The edge is where a lot of that transaction and processing is happening. And as a service provider, as Jeff knows, it's all about trying to minimize the cost operationally, not just CapEx as well. So at Silver Peak, we build appliances. When I say we build, we're a software company. We don't build hardware. We use, appliances from x86 platform vendors, Dell, and other partners. So we have that appliance because it's convenient and it's fast to go to market. So some of our service provider partners, Fujitsu and others, it's a faster way to go to market when you have an appliance. We also work with the same service providers to build universal CPE based solutions with different hardware platform vendors where we can support, and Roopa said it nicely, I'll say it a little differently, 1 VNF is better than 4. I wrote a blog about it, but it's essentially the fact that in Silver Peak, we have embedded routing, so full BGP, OSPF, so it's more than just a simple router, it's a very extended router. We have all the SD-WAN functionality, and we have WAN acceleration, which is where Silver Peak's heritage comes, and a stateful and zone-based firewall. It uses 1 VM, a couple of cores, and that can satisfy a lot of different vertical markets from our experience. So that is 1 VNF. We do support the multiple VNFs as well. So as far as we're concerned as a software platform vendor, we want to enable service providers to have all the different business models. So we also enable service chaining. In fact, we service chain with 8 of the leading software security vendors like Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Zscaler, ForcePoint, and Symantec. The list goes on, and we've tested them extensively. You go to those companies' websites, we can service chain in a universal CP environment. We even have our universal, we even support on platforms like Juniper, for example, which is also a competitor. But so in this environment of software, as a software vendor platform, the VNFs and, it's going to be the service providers that are going to say, well, what are the use cases? And I think it's all about use cases. The discussion gets bogged down in hardware. It's all about what are the set of applications, what are the set of verticals, what kind of customer environment do you need, and what is that economic model? And I think that's where, I know at Silver Peak, a lot of our team is focusing on building that business value use case with service provider partners as we go forward. The market is evolving. Basic SD-WAN, device-centric SD-WAN is going to move from where it was 2 years ago to more of a, machine learning, AI kind of platform.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, Ralph, you can add some insights on that because you work directly with service providers as well as enterprise customers. So as Jeff and Nav alluded to, so there is no one single format that will work. When you're looking at the branch virtualization as SD-WAN and NFV converge, right? Some functionality might be better delivered on a edge CPE, physical CPE, versus others can be just hosted as a VNF in the cloud. So what has been your experience working with these two segments?
Yeah, so I think the discussion shouldn't be, whether you use UCP or you don't use UCP. That's really the wrong discussion. And in fact, in the MEF service definition specification, we've defined a functional block called an SD-WAN edge. And that provides the functionality like the application, the deep packet inspection, application classification. How do I identify, is it Skype or is it, what's the application? And it has defining a policy engine. So in terms of, how do I apply policies? Like, do I forward it over a public internet connection, even though it might be encrypted, or do I disallow that and only forward it over MPLS based on maybe some QoS telemetry I'm receiving from the network? So I think that's the right approach, because when you define what is the SD-WAN edge, so when you get onto the SD-WAN service, what are those things that have to be done before you actually get on the wide area network? And then whether you implement that in a container or as a VM or in a UCPE or on a dedicated CPE, it doesn't really matter because or let's say it's based more on the use case. Right. So some workload, you might be interconnecting sites with SD-WAN. So, you have different choices, CPE, UCP, et cetera. The SD-WAN may end in a virtual private cloud, so you're running it in part of an AWS instance. Or maybe if you're in the private data center, you're running it on some servers. So I think what's important is to look at the functionality, and I like what Nav mentioned is I just wanted to briefly talk about is complexity of integration. So we've looked at integration of disparate VNFs and service chaining and all that. and everybody points to Etsy, Mano, and all of that. I could just say from firsthand experience, it's not plug and play directly. I mean, it's great. I run a consulting practice, so it's good for us to, we like to make money. We will gladly take money to do that. But it's really having things, as many things integrated as possible, and the service chaining is kind of done internally. There's a huge value in doing that operationally, because it does, and you'll probably attest that it takes a long time to put all the pieces of that together as well.
Yeah, there's one other piece, if I could add real quickly. We talk about best of breed, vendor, customer choice, et cetera, et cetera. One of the interesting pieces on our journey so far has been customers have started showing up. They're typically the larger customers that have this, where they have unique or specific applications that in the conversation, it looks really close to a VNF. They have to deploy some big hardware, some servers on premise in order to run that, and they look at our UCPE if that's the choice, and they say, hey, hold on a minute, you've got store and compute over there. Can you orchestrate that so that I could use that asset on my location? So it gets a little more squirrely when you're starting to talk about a third party really out there. It's the customer's application, but it's exactly what you said.
Right. Hopefully we have thrown some light on how SD-WAN specifically is impacting some of the most well-known technology trends like hybrid services or network functions. So the panelists are going to be here for another couple of days, so please feel free to reach out to them or even to me. As an analyst, I've been tracking these markets for a very long time if you want to chat more. Thank you so much.